Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin Parshas Vayishlach. And what I want to begin with is the Ramban's introduction to Parshas Vayishlach. If you look at the Ramban on Perek Lamed Beis Pasuk Daled, but right before that, there's like a paragraph beginning with the words Nichtava Parsha. So the Ramban says, Nichtava Parsha Zos, this section of Yaakov's encounter with Esav is written in the Torah. I mean, when you think about it, there's very little significant events that to be taken away from. I mean, it's a very scary lead up and it's very suspenseful, but basically it ends up being a non-story when you think about it. So why does the Torah even tell it to me? Lo diat, to inform us, that God saved his servant Yaakov, and redeemed Yaakov from one who was stronger than him. Vayishlach malach vayatzileyu, and he sent his angel to save Yaakov. Ulalamdenu od shehu. So that's item number one, which of course is certainly relevant for us to keep in mind in our times. Number two, ulalamdenu od shehu lo batach mitzikaso. Yaakov did not just rely on his piety. Vishtadel b'hatzala b'cho yicholto. Certainly a very relevant lesson throughout the generations, and certainly in our times as well. Yaakov tried whatever approach he could think of to protect himself. He didn't just say, we're going to say Tehillim and God should help. That's one of the things he did, but that's not all that he did. Yesh ba od remes l'doros. There's also, or foreshadowing here for future generations, Kikol asher eira lavinu im Esav achiv, yera lanu tamid im bnei Esav. The experience. What? Thank you. That everything that happened for Yaakov with his brother Esav will happen in the future for the Jewish people with Esav descendants. We will have to deal with these situations as well, to deal with adversarial dynamics. And we need to follow the approach of our patriarch Yaakov. We need to do the three things that Yaakov did as well. L'sfila, we certainly need to daven when we have dangerous situations. Ula daron, we need to give gifts. You can understand gifts in different ways. You could certainly understand gifts as meaning bribery. You could understand it that way. But you could also understand gifts as meaning diplomacy. And we need to prepare ourselves for war. And sometimes we have to flee. That's essential also. Okay. And so these lessons are certainly interesting to think about. Okay, let's see verse 4. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefonav. Yaakov sent messengers before him. Esav achiv, to Esav his brother, Arza Seir Sedei Edom, to the land of Seir in the field of Edom. Very, very basic question we could pose here. Why does Yaakov send messengers to Esav in the first place? Is this an encounter he's hoping to have? I mean, could you think about it? He doesn't want to deal with Esav. So what's the best way to not deal with Esav? Why don't you send messengers to let him know you're coming? Why would you do that? So the Ramban on Pasuk Daled, Esav achiv Arza Seir, Bavur hayos negev Eretz Yisrael al yedei Edom. The south of Israel is adjacent to the land of Edom. The Aviv Yoshev Eretz HaNegev, and that area of Israel is where Yitzchak was living, and that's where Yaakov was going. Yesh lo lavor derech Edom o karav misham. Either Yaakov is going to pass through the land of Edom, or very close there. Al kain pachad, ulai yishma Esav. So therefore, he's very concerned. Maybe Esav will hear that Yaakov is in the vicinity. V'hiktim l'shloach elav malachim la'artzo. So he wants to preempt Esav's reaction when he hears that Yaakov is near him. Who knows what Esav will do? So he's going to try to preempt him in a diplomatic way. So he sends emissaries to the land of Esav. It's very interesting. The Medrash calls Yaakov to task for this. Amru b'Bereishis Rabbah, machzik ba'oznei kelef. They cite the pasuk in Mishnah that talks about trying to hold on to the ears of a dog. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, l'darko haya mahalech, v'yisa m'shaleach etzlo. Esav was doing his own thing. Esav was going on his own path. And what you send messengers to him for? This is what God says to Yaakov. And so says your servant Yaakov. So it's interesting. So we understand Yaakov's rationale, but it is interesting that the Medrash calls him to task. Well, why'd you even initiate with him? V'aldati gam zeh yirbos. Says the Ramban. Again, this is the Ramban's approach to so much in this book, that this is foreshadowing for future generations. Ki anachnu hischalnu nefilasenu biyad Edom. That the beginning of our decline during the times of the Second Temple, we began the situation with Edom. Ki malchei ba'yisheni ba'u bebris im haromiyim. The kings of Israel during the second Beis HaMikdash made a covenant with the Romans. Umehem shabo baroma. Some of them even went to Rome. V'hi hoisa sibas nefilasam biyadam. And this led to the ultimate conquest by the Romans of the Second Temple. So it's a fascinating thing. So the Ramban says this story that Yaakov reaches out to Esav, and according to the Medrash, it was a mistake that Yaakov reached out to Esav. It didn't turn out to be damaging, but it wasn't a good idea. This is foreshadowing that there'll be another time where Yaakov's descendants will reach out to Esav's descendants when it wasn't such a good deal, such a good idea. Okay. Verse 5. Vaytzavo some more. And Yaakov instructed the messenger, saying, Ko somrun laduni leso. So you should say to my master Esav, Ko amar avdecha Yaakov. So says your servant Yaakov, Him Lavan garti. I've lived with Lavan, vaychar ad ata, and I've tarried with Lavan up until this point. Verse 6. Vayili shor v'chamor tzomeh v'meshivcha. I've had all kinds of assets that I've developed from Lavan's house, oxen, donkeys, sheep, servants. And I'm sending you an offering to find favor in your eyes. Okay, let's go to the Ramban on Pasuk Hey. Ko somrun laduni leisav ko amar avdecha Yaakov. Sivo son. Yaakov instructs his messengers. Sheyomru laduni leisav. They should say the words that I, Yaakov, see myself as being Esav's servant. Anachnu shalom. We, the messengers, are Esav's. O shluchim elav, or we've been sent to him. V'leimor lo, and we're supposed to say to him, Ko amar avdecha Yaakov im lavan garti. V'doma lo b'parsha l'mi ata. O shekro Yaakov b'vnei adoni Esav. La'ashirim shalo yazkiruhu, afilu shalo b'fanav, rak derek kavod. Birosam ki adonam koreoso adoni. So basically, the Ramban has two pshatim in what Yaakov says to the messengers. So you should say to my master Esav, either when you show up, say, my master Esav, I'm ready for you, or even when Yaakov is just referencing Esav, he refers to him as his master because he wants them to be in the habit of referring to Esav in a very respectful way. Why does Yaakov give so much respect to Esav? My master, why does he give so much respect to Esav? Vida, says the Ramban, you should know. This honor that Yaakov gives to his brother, Lemor, Adoni, the Avdecha, referring to Esav as his master and referring to himself as Esav's servant, it's normal for a younger sibling to give great prominence and honor to the oldest of the siblings. Ki'ilu hu aviv, as if he was his father. Kasher ramza lanu gam Torah, the Rabbos Achicha Gadol, famous idea. Kabed es avicha v'esimecha, honor your father and your mother, and the S is there to include something else. Achicha Gadol, the oldest brother, the Bechor, you should also honor. So the Ramban says this is a similar idea, that the culture was that the younger child honors the older child. Yaakov lokach b'choraso v'yespir chaso. Yaakov, of course, bought the birthright and received the blessing. The Esav sotem oso aleim. Esav hates Yaakov because he got these things. The ata hayamarelo ki'ilu heina mechira yi etzlo klum. So this is extremely significant. This is more than just trying to curry favor with him. Yaakov is speaking to Esav as the younger brother would speak to the Bechor. So what he's trying to convey to Esav is, as far as I'm concerned, you're still the Bechor, even though I bought the birthright from you. And that's the meaning behind him calling him my master. And the goal is to lessen the resentment in the heart of Esav. Okay, let's go ahead now to verse 17. Okay, so now he's actually sending gifts. In other words, the messengers went, and sort of it was like a message of a positive greeting, but they weren't actually sending gifts yet. So there's this whole big package. You can look at the previous psukim, all these animals. And now in verse 17, Vayitain biyad avadav eider lebado, and he put in the hands of his servants each separate flock. Vayomer el avadav ivru lefonai, and Yaakov said to his servants, pass before me. V'revach tasimu, place space, bein eider uvein eider, between the different flocks. There are going to be 3 shipments, so to say, of cattle and livestock. Make sure there's sufficient room between the 3 shipments. Why is that important? Why does this need to be told to us? Why does he need to say it to them? But more so, why does it need to be told to us? The Ramban on Pasuk Yud Zayin, V'revach tasimu bein eider, today laspia eino shel oso harasha, to get Esav excited with what he would see, ulesaveyu al adoro, to get him fixated on the gift. In other words, we know what it's like. You bring out one thing and that looks pretty good, and then there's a pause, and then there's more, and then there's a pause, and then there's more. The suburb gracious Rabbah yesh bazer remes. The Medrash says this is alluding to something. Amar Yaakov Yaakov says before Hashem, Ribono shel olam, im yutzaros bo sabonai lo savi osan zu acher zu. Yaakov davens to Hashem that if my children will have difficulties, let them not come one right after the other. Elaharvach lahem mitzarosayim. Give them space in between their calamities. Asa remes, shiva misim guarnunios, shiigbu b'nei Esav mizaro, b'revach, b'hefresh bein zu lazu. So really interesting pshat. That according to this, the Ramban says, Yaakov is trying to create foreshadowing that when his descendants would ultimately have to pay taxes and other gifts to the descendants of Esav, there'd be space between. It wouldn't be a constant requirement. It's an interesting thing to think about. So we discussed this morning the Ramban's introduction to the whole story of Yaakov and Esav. We discussed why Yaakov sends a message to Esav in the first place. We discussed why Yaakov, the significance of Yaakov referring to Esav as his master. And we discussed the significance of there being this great space between the flocks. Forgive me, I'm not up to taking comments today. Somebody is already late for school. Right, Miriam? We got to get you going, right? Okay. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.